Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to How Top Commercial Real Estate Brokers Are Finding Success. My name is Gina Melchiori, Senior Account Executive over here at Buildout. I've been with Buildout since we all figured out who Joe Exotic was, so right around 4.5 years now. If anyone knows software, you know in dog years, I'm essentially 112 at this point. So I've been here at around the block a little bit. I'm super stoked. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with and interrogating the Chris Ressa. Chris's track record of success in the commercial real estate industry has truly been impressive, and we're excited to chat with him today and learn a little bit more about his career. How are you doing, Chris? How you feeling?
I feel great. How about you? You
I'm
sound
good.
like you feel great.
I feel fabulous. I mean, the cicadas are dying off where I'm at, and I've had a couple coffees, so we're good today.
Awesome.
All right, Chris, you are in the hot seat. I've got some questions for you. So first, before we start, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, going over a little bit about what area you service, what type of properties you're normally dealing with, spill your guts to me.
So my name's Chris Ressa. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at DLC. We're an owner and operator, so we're not a brokerage shop. We're an ownership shop. We do have a third-party services line where we do have some brokers that work for us, and but our core is we are an ownership shop. So we focus on retail shopping centers in the open air retail space. So we own, operate primarily grocery anchored and power centers. We're vertically integrated, so we don't third party a ton. We have our own leasing team, our own construction team. We have our own general contracting firm, an architecture firm. We have our own property management team. So we're a vertically integrated operator that buys, owns, operates retail shopping centers. We have a development arm where we in the net lease space, so it's a build to sell business where we develop for net lease clients and sell into the net lease market that product.
Awesome, awesome. I probably should have just asked you, like, Chris, what don't you do? And that would have
Yeah,
been even easier.
I don't
That's
do all that. I work in a company that does all that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for walking us through that. I know everybody's got a different journey. No one has the same pathway of getting into commercial real estate. So what does that look like for you? Where'd you come from? How did you get here?
So I wrestled my whole life, and I wrestled in college at Rutgers University.
Mhm.
And uh, my wrestling coach came to practice one day and he said, "We have who's looking for a job and as you're graduating?" And I said, "Me." And he said, "Well, I used to coach Little League like 30 years ago." And so that's like 50 years ago from today. And he said, one of the kids that I coached is now the director of real estate for the Sherwin-Williams company, the paint stores. And they're looking for a corporate real estate professional to come and train, or an entry level person that they can train in corporate real estate.
Mhm.
And so I went on the interview. He connected me with the guy. I got the job. He was a great mentor. His name was Bill Seal. Bill was the director of real estate for Sherwin-Williams. Sherwin-Williams, for those who don't know, is the paint stores company. So Bill's job was he was in charge of opening and relocating all their stores. He was in charge of their district offices. He was in charge of the industrial warehouses they had in that market. And so I got into the commercial real estate space through the tenant side, and I realized it was Sherwin-Williams is a fantastic company. I realized I was more passionate about you call it landlord developer side. And at the time, it kind of felt like to me, there was like three paths I could go. I could be on landlord side, the brokerage side, or the tenant side. And I went and decided that I really liked the concept of the landlord developer side. At the moment, I was a tenant. And so I left Sherwin-Williams. I went to a landlord developer, and that's how I got my start.
That's incredible. I've seen those guys at the conferences too, so that's so cool. They gave me some free nail polish last time I got, so thanks for the hookup. Awesome, though. I'm telling you, every time I talk to somebody, no one has the same story. And who knew your wrestling would have gotten you to this point here?
There you go.
That's awesome. So, all right, you're an expert on the retail market landscape. So, I got to ask, how would you describe right now the overall retail market landscape as we're moving now into the second half of 2024?
I think the intersection of retail and real estate has never been stronger than it is today. So I think you have like two buckets. You have the overall commercial real estate, you have the retail sector, and then you have the intersection of those two. So at the intersection of retail and real estate, it's never been the foundation, the fundamentals of retail real estate have never been stronger. So we have record low supply of available space on the market. And that's been caused by a few things. One, with the narrative around e-commerce surrounding, starting after the great financial crisis in 2008, we stopped building a lot of retail space. Two, that narrative kept pushing and obsolete space got repurposed into multifamily, into office, industrial. And then you go into COVID and there was this narrative that all these stores were going to close. And just the opposite happened, which is coming out of COVID, retail had a moment and it did exceedingly well where all these retailers needed space. And now there's not enough space for all these retailers, which helped rents, which helped the vibrancy of shopping centers. And I think one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is, why did that happen? I think one of the things that happened is there are very few companies at scale. I don't know what we want to call at scale, over $10 million in revenue. Very few companies at scale that do e-commerce only and are profitable. It's very hard. And so what happened is there was a lot of companies that when stores were closed in e-commerce, they sold more products. And so they lost more money. And so consumers kept buying more and more online and they kept losing more and more money. And this created a necessity for stores where the cost of entry for a store, for a retailer, is if you and I decide we want to open a business, if you and I want to go to e-commerce and open up a t-shirt shop, it is less expensive, the cost of entry, than building a physical store. But the moment you want to scale and you want to go to multiple markets, the cost of scaling e-commerce is a lot greater than scaling a physical store presence across the nation. So we like to say, like the narrative was like, oh, e-commerce was going to kill brick and mortar. Then it moved to, well, now you need, and we want to give consumers this experience from like an omni-channel presence where they can go to the store, or they can go online, to where now the narrative, and I think the reality is, you can't make money in clicks without the bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that all that has pointed to a really strong foundation for physical retail. And then you add that physical retail has benefited from new users. So the closest real estate to the consumer is retail real estate, right? Industrial buildings are a little further off from where you live.
Yeah.
Office buildings are a little further off from where you live. Hospitals are a little further off. The closest real estate, whether it's the local grocery store, convenience store, nail salon, it's a little closer than all those. So if you hear any businesses talk about they want to get closer to the consumer, what that typically means is they're going to end up landing physically in retail real estate. And one of the examples I give is the healthcare industry decided that they wanted to get closer to the consumer in, like around the great financial crisis. And they did that for a variety of reasons. And anyone who was not an overnight stay, they wanted to get out of the expensive hospital real estate. And they came up with this concept called urgent cares, immediate care. And now you look, we want to take those, we want to bring closer to the consumer. Now you wake up, call it 15 years later, and there's like an urgent care in every shopping center in America. So
Yep.
anytime anyone decides they want to get closer to the consumer, that ends up typically translating to they want to get into retail real estate. And for us specifically, we're in the open air space, which, has been doing better than the enclosed mall, needs-based retail real estate, and suburban and rural needs-based real estate, whereas you had this migration out of the cities after COVID. So I think the suburban open air real estate is having a real big moment, and retail real estate is stronger than it's ever been.
Interesting. Interesting. Gosh, it's wild how things change, but you're speaking to my soul. I know exactly where the urgent care is here. I know where the nail salon is. I know where I'm going to get my t-shirt soon. And I also know that I still love going to the bricks.
Yeah,
So
we talk about a lot, like a lot of the narrative that I read that like pains me at times is like, we need to have retail because it provides emotional connection to the consumer. And there's this word experience, and we need to give the consumer experience. One of the things I constantly say all the time is we need physical retail because that's the place where a retailer can deliver products and services to a community and to people and actually profit. Because if they can't profit, then they can't deliver the basic needs that communities and people need. I think we're going to see at some point in time, convenience is going to be the utmost luxury, right? Like if I want to DoorDash a coffee to my house right now, it's like $25. Like that's not sustainable. We need stores.
yeah.
Because no, most people can't afford to pay $25 for a cup of coffee.
Not, and with my habit of it, I would be broke instantly and no longer be able to pay a mortgage. So I appreciate.
So you need a store.
Yeah, exactly. You need the place to show up, go get it, go out. I don't know, too. I think people want to get out of the house. So they want to have a good excuse too, just to get out. And
Yeah, so so that's the point I was making though, which is I like to stay away personally from that narrative, which is true, but I want to make it more of just like maybe one day we'll have a drone who can deliver the coffee for $2.99 to your house. But I think we're far off from that. I think we need it financially to go to the store.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. That checks out. Um, Chris, that brings me to a good point too. You mentioned some different key trends that are starting to emerge in general. Are there any other key trends that you feel like are emerging in the retail sector just this year that you feel like looking forward are definitely going to shape the market?
So some trends. I mean, in that microcosm of it, in that micro of a time period, I don't know. I would say some trends that I don't know that people are talking about a lot. I think franchising is one of the biggest retail trends that's impacted and will continue to impact the retail real estate business. Many concepts being born today are getting franchised much quicker than they did in yesteryear. The concept of McDonald's was unique. Now it's the norm. Right. And there are a lot of corporate stores, Starbucks, Chipotle, TJ Maxx are corporate stores where there's no franchising, but a lot of new concepts are being franchised. So I think that's a key trend. That's doing a few things. That's the local tenant. It's still a local tenant for the landlord, but with a brand name now. And I think it's enabling businesses to scale much quicker because there's only a few ways that they can raise capital. And this one seems to be the one that is taking off. So I think that's a huge trend. I think from 2008 to 2000, call it 19, we saw a lot of what I would call in-market relocations. So TJ Maxx is in this shopping center. They're going to move to the one across the street, better rent deal, what have you. I think that's going to happen a lot less. That's going to happen a lot less because there's no space for them to move to. And then two, I think the cost of moving because of construction costs is getting so challenging to make the numbers work that it's easier to renew. This creates an opportunity for landlords who in 2008 to 2019 rents have been kind of flat. This is an opportunity for landlords to start to get for 10 years, they had no rent growth to start to get some rent growth. Um, those are a couple trends. There's more.
It's funny when you talk about the franchising too, you don't realize what starts popping up around you. I've seen chiropractic franchises starting, facials for skincare,
Yeah, that's crazy.
like gyms and spas. It's wild.
A lot of new
Um,
franchises.
yeah, with that too, that I mean, you mentioned, like those urgent cares being popping up at some point, and there's a lot that's coming into higher demand. Of all the retail spaces, what types do you see as being in highest demand right now? And with those, are there any other factors that you haven't mentioned that you feel like is driving that demand for those types of spaces?
Uh, I think at least the way I live in the world I live in, I think value's always in vogue, but it's really in vogue now. So value retailers. So people like to get a deal, and in some regard with inflation and cost of living in certain places, people need a deal.
Yeah.
So value retail is winning. That's one. I think two, that you just think about some of the groups that you mentioned and who's growing. Clearly, anyone who's in and around the health and wellness space, and however you define health and wellness, whether that's a chiropractor, whether that's a gym, whether that's an urgent care, clearly that's an area where everyone's trying to get share of wallet in the health and wellness space. So those are some areas.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. I love a good deal and I'm all about the health and wellness. So you're just like you guys are just doing it for Gina.
There you
Um,
go.
do analytics, data analytics, AI in general play any sort of part in strategizing for finding and closing deals for those that you help or what you guys work on?
I think so. One of the things that I think is interesting, and I'm going to answer this a different way, is I think all the empirical data uh, will eventually be commoditized. Um, and everyone's trying to do it first and sell that. I think the data that where you can make the most money is on the anecdotal data that can't be figured out by AI or can't be figured out by a system. Um, to me, I think is the data that's so critical. And we use all the things that everyone else uses, right? Like Placer and Esri and all these good demographics and traffic and sales forecasting tools. But I think the data that, you know, that doesn't get caught, like, hey, you're doing this, but did you know so-and-so's thinking about doing this over here? If you do this, they'll probably do that. That data is way more valuable than, something that someone that's in the system somewhere that AI can scrape and make look pretty for you. That data is good. It's going to get commoditized and everyone's going to have it. I want the data that's not commoditized and not everyone knows, because that's where you can make, on the dislocation information is where you can make the money.
Yeah, not to quote the bumper stickers I used to see in like fourth grade, but knowledge is power, right? Like those
Sure.
things that you learn from conversations, the human aspects, the storylines that you're concocting in the area and being that expert, you can't just look at a spreadsheet and figure that out every single time.
Sure.
All right. I know there's going to be people listening that need advice and they want some words of wisdom, Chris. So, what advice would you give to any retail brokers looking to stay competitive and relevant, especially now that we're already blasting through the first half of the year when they're looking at this next half? What would you say to them?
I think what I think that at least in when we're hiring and using brokers, I think one of the things that um, everyone tries to stand out, but a lot of people say the same thing. And so they're not actually standing out. And so I think whatever your differentiator is, I think is critical in like trying to land business and being able to communicate that. There's riches and niches. And so if you can, have a value proposition to the marketplace that most people don't have, if you're just saying like, I know this market cold, I'll work really hard. That's what every broker's saying, And so I think you need to, if you want to, in a world where there's less vacancy, so there's less leasing deals to do, capital markets are challenged, and therefore there's less investment sales to do. I think you have to try to figure out your niche and what your differentiator is, and that will help land more business.
I love that. I love it. Be the go-to on something rather than trying to be something to everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. No one's going to be like, hey, don't worry. I'm going to only work mediocre for you.
Exactly.
Not going to happen. Last question to close you out here, and I appreciate you giving me this time, but are there any particular strategies or, best practices that you would recommend for brokers to start implementing right now?
Uh, any strategies? I'm trying to be what I would call non-redundant to anyone else who might have answered this for you. I would say that I think the one thing that I would, and on the retail side, the brokers I deal with more are on the leasing side. And so I don't know about a strategy, but I would say one of the things that in today's environment, the I think what at least the property owners are looking for are the brokers who are not scared of and who embrace the hard.
Mm.
And I think a lot of owners are like really hesitant on the broker who's trying to gobble up market share and wants to put up their sign and I think everyone loves relationships, but I think owners are cognizant of that some of their spaces are going to require more than relationships to get done. And typically the juice and where the money is in the spaces that are not going to get leased on a sign and probably not on some relationship and are going to take a lot of grit and hard work. And I think one of the things I would say is whoever's embracing those has a huge opportunity.
I love that. Get gritty.
There you go.
Somebody's got to do it. So why not, be the person listening to it? Chris, I so appreciate your time, and it was very exciting for me to be able to interrogate the heck out of you and put some of your knowledge out there in the ether. But is there anything that we left off the table that before we close out, you're like, Gina, can't believe you didn't ask me about this. The people got to know, or did we totally just crush it and cover it all?
We crushed it and covered it all.
Nice. The coffee did good for us, Chris.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have you back on another day.
Sounds great. Thanks, Gina.
Thanks, Chris.